the Martin Segal Theater Center, the greatest center CUNY in the heart of Manhattan, Midtown. And again, it's a sunny, kind of glorious New York day, as good as it ever will get. And the life seems to be slowly coming back. Cars are beeping again on the streets. More and more people come. I saw yesterday people with suitcases that even looked like tourists. They had that tourist smile. It's something we haven't seen for a year. So things are changing. A friend of mine is closing one restaurant, opening another one, and she is very nervous. And now she thinks maybe better times are ahead. Still, there's lots of uncertainty. Everything is still closed. Performing arts spaces have not opened up. There's some talk that in Broadway will be back December 5th with musicals. I'm not sure if this is what we really need, the new Michael Jackson musical. Is that the thing, the first thing after a COVID time? But it is, of course, important for the identity of the city to have it here. But I think we all have to really think, what are we going to show after this crisis? Many people on this talk said, this was a rehearsal, and we better don't screw this up. What is coming? The environmental crisis next to political, economic crisis, question of racism and all of that. But very, very big things are waiting for us, confronting us. And I think we all hope that this was a time where we reflect and things are different. Today, we have a very significant talk in my book. We all have, of course, significant talks. Yesterday, I thought it was a wonderful presentation from Carrie Perloff about her work in San Francisco, the ACT for over 25 years, leading an institution, how it was for her coming in as a very, very young woman who had to fight, then took over, showed, produced, raised funds, are very impressive. And her thoughts on theater, on writing, on art, and what to do right now were impressive. Things are changing. Things will not stay how they are. And even to have the things stay how they are, they need to change. That change is possible, is an utopia. It's something we think about, and often it does not happen and not in the way we think about it. We today now turn to a country that has one of the most troubled histories, we think, in the world, to Chile. And today we have with us Marco Layera, a fantastic worker in the global field of theater. With us is Martin Valdés Stauber, a dramaturge and sociologist who works for him, who will translate. Something extraordinary happened in the country of Chile that is perhaps more known for what happened with the times of Pinochet and the great Guillermo Calderón, who we are a bit more familiar here also in the US, wrote about it so much in La Villa and in so many other places. And Marco Layera came to us to the Skirball Center at NYU. We almost had Jay Wegman with us, who presented him, who then couldn't make it today. So Marco and Martin, welcome. Where are you guys and what time is it? Marco will have a translation. He will understand our question in English, but we have a translation. So Marco, where are you? What time is it?
Hola. Acá son las 12. Estoy en Santiago de Chile. Hoy es un día feriado. Se celebran un homenaje a la Armada. Hay que entender que nuestro país, la identidad de nuestro país está construida con una narrativa de guerra, cosa que estamos cambiando de a poco, así que hoy en día un día feriado.
Let's translate. 1 second, let's translate.
Yes, he's in Santiago de Chile, which is actually the same time zone as New York, so it's noon. And today is a holiday in Chile because of a festive day linked to a military event, to the Armada. And Mark was describing that the whole narrative of the country of Chile is linked to war and to narrations of war, and that's something that they are changing right now.
Mm-hmm. And Martin, where are you?
I'm currently in Munich, in the south of Germany.
Good, and you?
At Münchner Kammerspiele, where some people might have heard about Münchner Kammerspiele, where, for instance, Bertolt Brecht started in the 20s.
Yeah, one of the most significant theaters in Germany, won the big award as best theaters, and for many reasons, also through the artistic leadership, you know, is so well known. And you guys collaborate. Do I understand that right, Martin?
Yes, I mean, I have been following Marco's work for some years already, because his work has been shown in all significant festivals in Europe and beyond, also in, as you mentioned, in New York City. And we know each other for almost 2 years now, and we planned to do a project here in Munich, which had to be canceled due to the pandemic. And now we're working on a new project, which is also trying to rethink international collaboration.
Amazing. For our viewers who are not so familiar, let me give a very short description and bio. Marco is a theater director, a teacher, and a playwright. He studied law, actually, at the University of Chile, and is specialized in criminology. He received theatrical training at Teatro, Escuela, La Matriz, and the Escuela Teatro Imagen, and he founded in 2008 the company Re-sentida. His work has been presented in over 30 countries, and for everybody, especially from the US, you know, that knows this is a remarkable, see, everybody from the Americas, I mean, also to include in that, you know, this is a remarkable feat to be such a global audience in over 100 stages. He was at the Skirball, and his theatrical creation reflect on the great political responsibility and the understanding of theater as an instrument of criticism, reflection, and construction, and in a way about utopia, what is possible, what is not possible, and if something is possible, what should we do? And we will, of course, talk about this now. Martin is a dramaturge and a sociologist. He studied economics and sociology in Germany and in Berkeley and in Cambridge, the UK, and he became dramaturge at the Münchner Kammerspiele, which was Theater of the Year in the German speaking countries. A very, very big deal. He worked with great artists, some of them who we also had here, like Milo Rau, Philippe Quesne, Rimini Protokoll, all three were with us, but also Marlene Monteiro, Rabih, Mroué, who also was here, and Prodromos, Tsinikoris, if I said that right, among others. And he is specialized in international collaborations, also about the idea of public space and the city. We might come back to that one day with him, and the interface of arts and technology. So thank you both for coming here. Before we start, Marco, also about your work. Tell us what happened, the election, I think it was last weekend. What happened?
El fin de semana pasado tuvimos las elecciones para los constituyentes. Bueno, no sé si están informados. El 18 de octubre en Chile hubo un estallido social, ¿no? Salieron miles de personas a las calles y a partir de ese hecho hubo un pacto político en donde se pactó realizar una nueva constitución, y para eso se llamó elecciones, para llamar a nuevos constituyentes. Eso como prólogo.
Yes, as a prologue, so this weekend, the people who will write or rewrite the new constitution were elected. And as a background information, on the 18th of October in 2019, there was this outburst of indignation, a social outburst in Chile, in Santiago de Chile, and in all the country, in which thousands of people went to the streets, and this triggered a political process and led to a political agreement that the constitution now will be rewritten. And on the weekend we voted who will be those people rewriting the constitution.
Yeah, yeah, go on.
Bueno, este fin de semana llegó el momento tan esperado de elegir a estos 155 ciudadanos que van a escribir la nueva constitución, y pasó algo inédito en la historia política de Chile, donde la mayoría de los ciudadanos electos que vienen de los movimientos sociales. Y esto, yo estoy muy contento porque fue la derecha y la coalición que nos gobernó de centro izquierda realmente tuvieron muy poca votación, y tenemos la posibilidad que hoy en día la derecha no tiene el tercio que necesita para poner obstáculos para crear una nueva constitución.
So this was a moment that everyone was expecting, to vote these 155 people. And something really unprecedented happened in the political history of Chile, that a majority of the people that have been elected are from the social movements. They are not from classical politics. And so that makes him very happy, especially because of two reasons. One is that the right-wing parties, but also the center-left parties who had like an agreement maintaining the political system, really lost big shares of votes. And secondly, and probably even more importantly, is that the right-wing parties don't even have a third of the share of the seats, so they cannot block anything that the rest of the people want to write down and set down in the new constitution.
Yeah, it's just an incredible, stunning development. I think millions of women also went on the street during the demonstration. Over 1 million demonstrated. They were also last year, police was shooting military against demonstrators. It was a very dangerous situation. Guillermo Calderon spoke up to us also about, and the fact that the Constitution of Chile that was written in 1980 under Pinochet will be rewritten. 155 people were selected, and the current parties got just 37 out of those 155 seats. And people came from social movements, not even the existing kind of traditional liberal left-wing parties. There are people coming from the uprising, from the people of the street who came in, and now a country will rewrite its constitutions, and the people who normally, traditionally, are the ones who go to jail, are arrested, the ones whose voices are not heard, they are in a driver's seat. It is shocking, it is stunning, it is beautiful, one of the best news we have heard in a long time. If we think of our talks with India, how terribly devastating it is, the situation in Palestine and in Israel and China, Hong Kong. So this is something completely unusual and inspiring. How do you feel about this, Marco?
Yo creo que estamos viviendo un momento único y repetible a nivel mundial, muy efervescente, donde estamos en una época de cambio, y eso es muy interesante, y sobre todo porque nos interpela a todos. Creo que la irrupción del feminismo ha sido una de las cosas más importantes que ha pasado en Chile. Al feminismo y a los estudiantes secundarios también, a ellos les tenemos que agradecer este cambio.
Yes, we are living a unique moment, a moment that will not be repeated in that way again. It's a vibrant moment of change, which also calls into question everything. And this is something we have to be grateful for, especially the eruption of feminism in Chile, and also the students, especially the high school students and students from the universities, who really broke up the social situation.
Yeah, and if I understand right, even last December, the police and military shot with rubber bullets into the eyes of students, of demonstrators, intentionally. So many lost their eyes. It was a terrible fight. There were curfews, people couldn't come up. This was all before Corona. Then the same people in power shut the country down for Corona. It was confusing, complicated. But this outcome is stunning. Marco, do you feel you are part of what happened?
Sin duda, sin duda. Nosotros, yo creo que nosotros hacemos un teatro, entre comillas, que llamamos un teatro comprometido, y desde nuestra primera obra nosotros siempre fuimos críticos con la transición democrática de nuestro país. Nosotros siempre...
Without any question, we always were part of a committed theater. From the very start on, from our first play on, we did a critical theater, especially critical theater with what we call the transition to democracy, which was and has been problematic.
Marco? We interrupted.
Dale, Marcos. Sí, puedes seguir.
Sí. desde esa perspectiva, claro, todos nos sentimos súper involucrados y también la fuerza, digamos, de la calle, de lo que pasó el 18 de octubre en adelante, nos interpela a nosotros, los artistas, a reformularnos, a cómo empezamos a tender lazos con las comunidades y cómo el teatro o las demás artes recuperan este poder que tiene la calle. Creo que se viene en tiempo.
Yes, so we are all tied into what is happening, and we are observing this energy and force from the street, right from the start of the social outburst on this 18th of October 2019, which also calls into question us as artists, as how we work, and it forces us to reformulate how we work and what we're doing in which aesthetic forms, and also how to tie together with communities and not to recreate the street, but to be connected to what is happening on the street.
Y en ese sentido creo que no basta solo con hacer arte, creo que tenemos que seguir disputando la calle, tenemos que seguir politizando la calle, tensionando los espacios públicos. De una u otra manera pienso a veces que el teatro debería derrumbar las murallas y abrirse. Creo que ese es el desafío, no bastarnos con encerrarnos y hacer teatro para unos pocos. Creo que hay muchos desafíos que nos interpelan directamente a la cultura. Sobre todo para mí uno de los más importantes es cómo democratizamos el acceso al teatro o al arte contemporáneo, que desde mi perspectiva hasta ahora ha sido muy elitista.
Okay.
So it's probably not enough to do art, because we are still like connected to what is happening on the streets, this whole process of politicization, and that sometimes Marco feels that we should be tearing down the walls of the theaters, because we cannot be enclosed, we cannot be in these closed buildings, and that there are too many challenges, too many things calling into question how we live together, and that also a big topic for him is linked to all this is how we can democratize the access to theater, the access to contemporary art, to tear down also the restrictions of accessibility.
Can Marco tell us, can you tell us a bit about the theater you did? Could you give a description, what your projects were, what they were about? How did they look like?
Ay, qué difícil pregunta, pero voy a hacer el intento. Yo creo que nosotros hacemos un teatro comprometido, y uno dice comprometido con qué, ¿no? Comprometido primero con nuestro país, con nuestra sociedad, con nuestra memoria. Nosotros generacionalmente, como un pulso de nuestra compañía,
Okay,
wait.
Al momento...
Translate. Hold the thought.
It's a hard question, but I will try. As I said before, we do have like a committed theater. The question now is committed to what? Mainly to our country, to our society, to the memory, to the legacy, and especially the self-memory of our country.
Marco? Y nuestro motor, cuando empezamos a trabajar y que se mantiene, pues como se llama la compañía, Re-sentidos. Yo presento una generación que se siente resentida, que tiene una herida que no ha cicatrizado, y una emoción también, un pulso creativo que tiene que ver con el desenfado, con la rabia y también con la profunda pena también de vivir en un país tan brutalmente desigual y en donde reina la impunidad hasta el día de hoy.
I'm taking notes meanwhile, so not to forget anything. So he was speaking about what drives him and his generation, because the company was formed by when it was formed in 2008 by a young generation of artists, and they call themselves la Re-sentida. So in English it would be the resentful, and this is a marker of his whole generation, that there are wounds which have not really cured. That there is pain, that there is anger, and that is something that has continued in a country that is brutally unequal, with social injustice, and especially with an incredible impunity for those that are committing crimes or violence.
Y en ese sentido lo que a nosotros nos interesa es habitar las contradicciones y explicitar las contradicciones que vivimos como sociedad. Y también, que lo venimos haciendo hace mucho tiempo, también es preguntarnos también por el rol de los artistas, ¿para qué? ¿Por qué?
And what we're interested in is to go into these contradictions that we also live, to show the contradictions and to question ourselves as artists. What is our role in all this? Why are we doing art? What are we doing? For whom are we doing it?
Can you tell us about one or two works, maybe in the beginning, where you felt this is what we did different than other theater companies?
Ya, sí, bueno, voy a hablar. Nuestro primer trabajo se llamó Simulacro y nosotros en el año 2010 celebraba en Chile el bicentenario, 200 años de independencia. Y las voces oficiales de Chile querían celebrar un país justo, progresista, socialmente inclusivo, digamos, un verdadero paraíso.
Yeah, translate.
So the first project we did was Simulacro. It was in 2010 when actually the country was about to celebrate 200 years of independence. And the official events, they wanted to celebrate a country that is just, progressive, inclusive, let's say a paradise.
Y nosotros de una manera quisimos, porque creemos que la identidad no solamente son las partes iluminadas de nuestra experiencia, sino que también esas partes oscuras. Y la idea era plantear que tanto el teatro como Chile era una puesta en escena donde cabían solo unos pocos personajes. Y desde ahí navegamos por los espacios dolorosos que todavía tenemos como país, las fracturas que tenemos, tratando de buscar, digamos, un viaje buscando nuestra identidad.
So it was to search not only for the illuminated parts of what Chile is and its history, but also to go into the dark places. And the basic idea was to treat in Simulacro display the theater in Chile alike is a place in which there's only space for some character, for some figures. And from there, from this restricted amount of characters that can be in that space, to go into the painful landscapes, into the ruptures within the country, a painful voyage.
Bueno, ese trabajo también, en el fondo nosotros consideramos que no había nada que celebrar. Y es muy interesante ese trabajo porque ese trabajo, todo lo que se planteó en ese trabajo es un poco lo que explotó el 18 de octubre este país. Por eso nosotros estamos muy contentos, porque digamos, nosotros ya olíamos ese espíritu de disconformidad, de angustia con esta transición política pactada, de vivir, digamos, en un país laboratorio donde se vive en un sistema neoliberal a rajatabla, extremo, diría yo. Entonces,
so that there was nothing for them. There was back then in 2010 when this anniversary happened, nothing to celebrate. And it's very interesting because everything they touched upon in this project and this theater play somehow exploded on that 18th of October, which was the triggering event for what you're witnessing now. And that's also why they are happy right now to see that they also already back then called into question this transition, which tried to calm down the actual questions of social justice, and also that it showed that Chile is treated as a laboratory country in which policies of neoliberalism are being tested in a very painful and way for the population.
Maybe Marco can tell us and our listeners about 18th of October. What did happen and where was Marco? Where were you?
Yo el 18 de octubre lamentablemente no estaba en Chile. Me arrepiento de algo que siempre soñé y me dio mucho dolor no estar. Estaba en España de gira.
So unfortunately, he was not in Chile, and it's really something he regrets, and which makes him quite sad that he hasn't been there on that very occasion. He was showing his work in Spain.
Así que fue muy doloroso, muy preocupante ver esto desde afuera. Fueron 2 semanas en donde no pudimos dormir en la noche porque seguíamos las noticias, lo pasamos muy mal, fue muy angustiante. Pensamos en parar la gira, en volver a Chile, fueron tiempos muy difíciles vivir esto desde afuera, sobre todo cuando era un momento que yo siempre había soñado. Nunca me voy a perdonar no haber estado en Chile. Es algo terrible que no va a volver a pasar. Y yo siempre lo soñé, fue terrible.
So it was a very painful and unsettling moment. The company was in Spain; they couldn't sleep. They were following the news on the other part of the globe. They were anxious. They were asking themselves if they should stop the tour, if they should go back. And it was hard to observe everything from afar. And that's also something that he will always regret and will never forgive himself, that this moment he was always dreaming about, and his work was oriented to this kind of a moment, that he was not there when it happened.
Martin, maybe for our listeners, give a short description of what happened on the streets on that day.
Bueno, ese día, el 18 de octubre, bueno, todo partió por un alza del precio en el metro, en donde los secundarios se rebelaron y llamaron a saltar los torniquetes. Ese fue el punto de partida, digamos, para un estallido social, donde miles de chilenos salieron a la calle en forma de protesta, y que también fue acompañado de numerosos actos, digamos, de saqueos, de violencia. Digamos que para mí también era una de las únicas respuestas que también había que acompañaban este movimiento. Producto de esto hubo una represión terrible por parte de los agentes del Estado. Lamentablemente se volvió a repetir lo que pasó, digamos, en dictadura, como lo que tú dijiste, millones.
So actually what triggered all this was that the price for the metro line, they went up, and then the people from like secondary schools, university colleges, they protested against that and said, let's like jump the restrictions and just use the public transport. And then many other people joined, and it was like the triggering event for this social outburst, which then also had violent elements and elements of riot. And perhaps we go later into that, because Marco was also like, I know what he was referring to is that the question of in which way this violence was legitimate. But what the official part, like police and the state, did was to react in a very strong repressive way, repeating the strategies of the dictatorship, unfortunately.
Eso fue, digamos...
Go ahead.
Y fue, bueno, muy doloroso nuevamente ver a mucha gente de la clase política dando la espalda al movimiento, y algunos, digamos, tratando de instrumentalizar también para agarrar pequeñas cuotas políticas. Pero fue sin duda un hecho único que va a marcar nuestra historia, que va a marcar nuestro futuro. Pero hay muchas cosas que todavía que hay que sanar, o sea, todavía hay mucha impunidad. Hay cinco organizaciones de derechos humanos han establecido en su informe que en Chile se violan los derechos humanos, se violaron los derechos humanos, y eso todavía la clase política no lo quiere aceptar.
So it was also a painful experience to see all that, and that once again the political class turned their back to the protesters, or tried to instrumentalize the protests for their own aims and goals. And it was for sure a unique moment which will be part of our history and our future, but still there are many things that have to be cured. There's a lot of impunity, and 5 NGOs, international NGOs, declared also that human rights violations have happened and are happening in Chile, and that is something that the political class has always neglected and ignored or silenced.
Y que si bien tiene, digamos, todo eso, ese lado oscuro, también tiene lados muy bello. La gente salió a la calle, se hizo comunidad por primera vez, pareciera que había una causa común. Las manifestaciones artísticas en la calle fueron impresionantes, nuestras paredes parecen una galería de arte, cómo de una u otra manera empezamos a disputar la calle, a disputar los monumentos, a transfigurar los monumentos, a hacerlos propios, a decir, acá tenemos que hacer un pacto generacional, acá tenemos que refundar este país.
So, I mean, on the one side, it was a dark moment, the violent repression, but it was also a very unique and beautiful moment to see that the people went out, that they gathered together, they created a community of protests, that they gather around one shared cause, and also the artistic imprint of the manifestation, demonstrations, that there are the artistic interventions in these demonstrations, how the whole city somehow turned into a museum, a gallery, because all walls were painted and decorated with statements, how monuments were transformed and redescribed, signified, and it also between the generations, a new pact, was forged on the street.
A question to Marco. There were the events of that December day. There was now the election that happened. We live in the time of Corona. How does he see, well, Marco, how do you see the role of the artist in Santiago de Chile at the moment? What do you think? Where does theater and art fit in? What is the most important thing to do for artists and keep in mind? And what should they think about?
Bueno, creo que son momentos muy difíciles de expresarse artísticamente como estábamos acostumbrados. Bueno, nosotros venimos desde desde el estallido social, que ya se venían cerrando los teatros. Entonces llevamos mucho tiempo sin poder expresarnos en nuestro espacio que era habitual. Creo yo que hoy en día hay que buscar...
One second, let's translate.
So it's difficult to express oneself in an artistic way, the way that we were used to, because already more or less from when the social outburst happened, theaters have been closed. And so we did not have access to the spaces where we were used to work in.
Y claro, y después de la pandemia, creo que para nosotros hay que buscar nuevos formatos. Y en ese sentido, creo que no hay que ponerse, creo que es el momento, creo que la crítica y los juicios se tienen que dejar en el congelador y apoyar a todos los artistas, ya sea con los medios que hacen, que están resistiendo y tienen el impulso de hacer. Yo creo que es el momento de apoyarse, de tener empatía y que sea bienvenido cualquier expresión artística, sea en el formato que sea. Creo que no es el momento de hacer juicios.
Martin?
This pandemic forced us to find new formats, and it's not the time for critics and or criticizing and judging. This is something we should put into the freezer, and that we should appreciate that people with the means they have resist and continue doing art, and that we should be supporting each other, that we should be showing empathy to all forms of artistic expression.
Marco, desde esa perspectiva, creo que desde perspectiva la práctica artística también está habitando también nuestra vida, nuestra vida cotidiana. Desde esa perspectiva yo, por ejemplo, me trato de expresar, mandé a hacer hace un tiempo atrás unos stickers, entonces que yo cuando salgo a la calle lo ando pegando con mis mensajes en toda la ciudad. esas son pequeñas formas, pequeñas prácticas que para mí me hacen seguir sintiéndome haciendo arte o expresándome, más que nada.
So, art practices is something that now is inhibiting our daily routines, our quotidian daily life. For instance, and it's more of a question of expressing oneself as well. So some time ago, he made some stickers with messages, and when he is on the streets going somewhere, he is decorating and spreading the messages. And it's also a form of expressing oneself in the cityscape artistically.
Marco, did you do any work in the last year? What did you do in time of Corona? Were you able?
No. Me ha sido muy difícil crear. No ha sido un momento muy productivo creativamente porque las labores domésticas y las labores de paternidad me colapsan el tiempo. Es un momento muy difícil de creación, de estudio también, y por un lado creo que está bien también parar, creo que uno también puede generar distancia para ver lo que venía haciendo, pero me ha sido muy difícil crear en este momento. Para otro artista a lo mejor ha sido muy inspirador, para mí no, he entrado un poquito en muchos momentos en alguna depresión y sobre todo que el tiempo no me ha dado para poder trabajar y tampoco he tenido oportunidad de trabajar. Yo vengo cesante hace casi 1 año y 2 meses.
So it has been difficult to create. It was not in that sense like a very productive time because also, you know, domestic routines, the duties of fatherhood, they all took more time, and it was a difficult situation to create. It had also benefits that you could step a bit back and have some distance to your work and reflect on things. Other people were perhaps more inspired by the time gained, but for him it was rather depressing, and it was also a question of time and having opportunities to produce. And if I may like add from my side, because when the pandemic started, Marco and me, we were about to create a new project in Munich, in Münchner Kammerspiele, because Matthias Lilienthal, who was for 5 years artistic director of Kammerspiele, was in his last season, and we had a huge project for the end, which was the staging of Roberto Bolaño's novel 2666, which is quite well known in the US. And this huge novel we planned to do with 10 international teams of directors across the city in a 24-hour performance, so that you would go with a bus from station to station. And Marco would actually have covered the 5th book of this big novel, which readers might know is about the German history. And the idea was that someone from outside would like twist the perspective on how German history is being narrated. And actually, where I was at the festival in Sao Paulo, and when I returned, Marco was already in Munich with his group, and he was about to show his last play, Paisajes para no colorear, landscapes not to be filled in. And then, but the theaters in Munich were already closed. So the people participating in that play had all to return to Chile, and very soon it was clear that we had to cancel our project. And so Marco had to fly back with everyone else to Chile. And ever since, all shows, international invitations to festivals across Europe and in the Americas were all canceled. And so it's really, starting anew, hoping that the tours will be possible in the future.
Martin, another question for you. You work at the Kammerspiele, you work so much with Milo Rau, you work with Lilienthal. Why do you guys think Marco's work is important? What does it stand for?
It's a tricky question because when answering it, you have always to find a balance, because I very much think we should not be asking artists from other parts in the world to reflect, like we don't invite them because they are reflecting and transporting a political reality from there to us because we are curious about that. And what Marco is doing is actually he's nourished and embedded in the reality and the social struggles in Chile profoundly. and everything that is happening now is already the seed you see in his previous works. But when you go and watch one of Marco's performances, it always will transcend the place where the play originated, where it was developed. So when you see the last play, for instance, which is a lot about feminism and also sexualized violence, you can hear, yes, there are references to the place where the rehearsals took place, but you will be immediately shocked by how close it gets to your own reality, wherever you are on the planet, on the globe. So, and also this capacity to write plays of your own, which are so profoundly nourished by the contemporary world surrounding you. And then you are playful in how you stage it, be it in a very delicate way or being in an incredibly powerful, energetic way. So this variety of aesthetic forms nourished by the contemporary occurrences and by universalism in the best sense, that everyone can resonate with what you see on stage, no matter your background.
Marco, question for you. Did you feel you were observing what is happening on the street? Did you feel you were part of the struggle for democracy, for freedom? Or did you feel you kind of formed it? You made it also happen. So so what was your role? How do you see the role of you and your company?
Sí, o sea, sin duda me siento parte. Creo que durante nuestro trabajo de 13 años hicimos un aporte a que sucediera esto. Y sí, soy parte, participo de algunos movimientos sociales, participo acá en hacer comunidad. Yo creo que ese es nuestro gran trabajo. Para mí ha sido hacer comunidad. Para el teatro, para mí, yo no puedo hacer teatro solo. Es imposible para mí hacer teatro solo. Yo necesito al otro, y para vivir también, y siempre ha sido esa mi visión. Yo creo en el teatro colectivo, y creo que la forma también de proyectarse políticamente es hacer comunidad.
Hold the thought, Martin.
Yes, I feel part of what happened, and the 13 years we have been working with the theater company contributed to what is happening now. We helped that it actually could take place, and also Marco himself is part of social movements beyond his theater work. And at the core of this is always this idea of creating community. Not only in theater, but in the theater work is also quite collective one. But Marco says that he needs the other. He needs the other when doing art, but also in this making community in his surroundings, in his neighborhood. And that's also a political form of engaging with the present.
Y sí, salgo a la calle, me manifiesto en la calle, trato insisto, creo que es un momento único donde no podemos dejar la calle de lado, tenemos que seguirla disputando. Y también, en base a esto, que me gustaría hablar de paisajes para no colorear, que creo que es una experiencia de las más bellas que me ha tocado vivir, transformadora en el teatro.
Yes. So I also go out to the streets, to the demonstrations. I demonstrate myself with others. And I really think that the street is not something we can stop occupying, that we still have to be there as well. I would like also to talk about this play, Paisajes para no colorear, which I would translate the landscapes not to be filled out, because it's one of the most beautiful and most transformative experiences for myself as a director and an artist.
Nosotros en general en todas nuestras obras siempre nos cuestionábamos, digamos, el rol del arte y cómo el arte podía estar ligado orgánicamente al movimiento social. Y desde esa perspectiva nosotros en un momento, debo admitir, como que nos cansamos un poco de seguir, o dijimos, ¿qué más allá de hacer teatro, qué más podemos hacer? Y desde ahí desplegamos una serie de acciones que tenían que ver con relacionarse directamente con la comunidad, no de manera paternalista, nunca, y poder compartir con ellos. Y desde ahí nace Paisajes para colorear, que responda al anhelo de nosotros de aunar las prácticas sociales con las prácticas artísticas.
So you, like, generally speaking, we always called into question the role of art, and asked ourselves, how can we organically link art with social movements? And somehow this was a question that at some point we were tired of asking, and we asked ourselves, what else? And we looked into collaborating, working together, organizing events with the communities, and not in a patronizing way, but in a sense of sharing. And from this, from this position, the play Paisajes para no colorear started off from a profound wish to combine social and artistic practice.
Bueno, y Paisaje no colorear es un trabajo en el que tuvimos un año de investigación y nos centramos, digamos, en la comunidad de adolescentes de sexo femenino. ¿Por qué la adolescencia? Y yo me siento representada por esa etapa, ¿no? Yo personalmente comulgo, digamos, con cierta radicalidad, con cierta efervescencia que tiene su espíritu contestatario, en donde al parecer reinara más la emoción que la razón. Yo y hasta histérico, yo hasta me siento un poco histérico también, o muchas veces se me cataloga que mis obras son histéricas, y sí, lo digo, me gusta que sean histéricas. Y lo que queríamos estudiar y reflexionar era cómo encontrar un mecanismo de control de los cuerpos de las adolescentes del adolescente de sexo femenino por parte del mundo adultocéntrico.
Okay, right.
Adultocéntrico dijiste al final. La última palabra. Sí. Just checking the last word. For the play Paisajes para no colorear, we did 1 year of investigation, exploration, research, especially with teenagers, female teenagers, people that define themselves as female. And Marco was stressing that he feels somehow represented also by what he experienced and what he saw with the teenagers and working with the teenagers, that sometimes the emotions were governing the reason, and sometimes his work is being called hysteric, and that he actually likes that possibility of being hysteric. And the play Paisajes para no colorear is somehow a study of the mechanisms of how the bodies are being controlled by a society defined by adulthood.
En Chile, hasta el día de hoy, está muy normalizado que del mundo adulto se ejerza violencia contra las menores de edad. Y cuando empezamos a hacer este proyecto Paisajes para colorear, nos dimos cuenta de una serie de hechos atroces en donde las víctimas eran mujeres personas de sexo femenino, que eran brutalmente violentadas por adultos. Y desde esa perspectiva nosotros nos cuestionamos qué pensaba esta comunidad adolescente, cómo se relacionaba con esos hechos, cómo se relacionaba con la historia de Chile, con los nuevos paradigmas, con los nuevos discursos. Teníamos muchas preguntas, queríamos saber mucho. Y sin duda nos dimos cuenta después de este trabajo que ellas son las protagonistas de este 18 de octubre, y sin duda son la vanguardia de la contracultura.
Okay, a second. Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you're hearing me. I was shortly cut off the internet. Marcos me cortó el internet. But I can go as far as I heard you. So that when we started doing the research, we saw how it was normalized in Chile. The violence of adults against non-adults, against children and teenagers, especially female ones. And we heard about really incredibly violent events where female bodies were brutally violated. Hasta ahí llegué, Marco.
Hasta ahí llegaste. Eso no hizo tener muchas preguntas hacia esa comunidad adolescente en relacionar cómo ellas reaccionaban frente a estos hechos, frente a cómo se relacionaban con la historia de Chile, con sus pares, con el presente, con los nuevos paradigmas, con los nuevos discursos. Teníamos muchas preguntas que queríamos saber en qué estaba esta juventud de adolescentes de sexo femenino. Y después de haber hecho el proyecto, sin duda, yo consideramos que ellas son las protagonistas de este cambio que pasó en Chile, de este estallido social, de lo que viene. Ellas son el gran motor. O sea, por ejemplo, en esta convención constituyente salieron muchas mujeres jóvenes de alcaldes ocupando cargos públicos, y tenemos mucha fe en que va a ser un cambio de paradigma, un cambio de prácticas políticas. Yo tengo mucha fe en eso. Y para cerrar, era que yo sigo considerando que la juventud, los adolescentes son la vanguardia de la contracultura. O sea, hay que tomarse desde la primavera árabe, el 15 de mayo en España, lo que está pasando ahora en Colombia, lo que pasó en Chile, los movimientos estudiantiles de Brasil, en México. Sin duda, el motor son los adolescentes, los jóvenes.
Very interesting thought at the end. So when they started working with these teenagers, they noticed that the teenagers were dealing quite a lot with many questions of how they define their own generation, of the events happening in Chile, of the relation to the parents, to the history of Chile, to the social and political discourses, and that they immediately became the protagonists of the whole process and the project, and that they are also the protagonists of what happened. And Marcus referring here to the protests and to what will be. And as an example, that now the last weekend there was not only the election of the 155 people writing the constitution, but also many mayors were elected and governors and many people on these political levels, and many of them are young women, and that they are the change, that all this involves a change of paradigm. And to conclude, he said that the youth is always the avant-garde of the how do you say, counterculture. They are always the avant-garde of the counterculture. And you see that in the Arab Spring, in the 15th of May movement in Spain, or the recent protests in Colombia, Brazil, Mexico. So.
Yeah, it's incredible. If we think of Roberto Bolano, who you also were part of to put his book into a theater play, the hopelessness, the violence, the killings of women, and now we have a moment of change done to a new generation, as you point out. It's an incredible thing. What will happen now? What do you think will happen in Chile? Will this moment last? Will there be another military dictatorship come in? And what will it do to your theater work? Will your theater work be different? So again, what does this moment mean? What will happen? Will it be successful? And will you change how you make theater?
Este es un momento, después de lo que pasó el fin de semana pasado, yo lo con muy esperanzador, con mucha ilusión, porque realmente vamos a poder hacer una constitución con una hoja en blanco, refundar realmente en otro país. Yo creo que nuestra constitución va a ser una constitución más progresista del mundo, me atrevo a decir eso, me atrevería a decir hasta la más progresista del mundo. Estoy muy confiado. Lo que también hay un temor, hay una desilusión a que no funcione, a que lo hagamos mal. Y también está el gran temor que está esta sombra, ¿no?, que tiene que ver con el ejército de Chile, con los militares, con los poderosos, que no respeten nada y en algún momento vuelvan a instalar el dolor, la violencia ¿qué ha pasado ya? Entonces es eso. Siempre yo creo que estamos viviendo en entre la desilusión, la utopía, el dolor, es muy complejo.
Just hold the thought. Just go back to that, Martin, translate.
Yes, so it's in this very moment, after the election of last weekend, we're all full of hopes and passionate about the future. And with the result of this election, we really can start anew. We can write on a blank white paper this constitution. We can refound our country. And I would dare to say that we will have at the end one of the, or even the most progressive constitution in the world. Obviously, there's also this fear that it could go wrong, that we could fail. And there's always this shadow, this shade of the military and other old elites, that they could not respect the process at all. And they could reinstall pain. So we are always between this disillusion and utopia.
Mm-hmm.
Y en cuanto a la forma de hacer teatro, sí creo que tenemos que, yo siento que cerramos una etapa, pero creo que la cerramos antes, yo como artista, creo que desde paisaje para no colorear, pero en adelante, para mí viene, creo que un replanteamiento, me dio la posibilidad de replantearme mis prácticas y de transformarme por eso para mí es tan importante ese trabajo. Haber estado en contacto con más de 150 adolescentes, para mí fue un cambio brutal, se me abrió la cabeza, una nueva forma de relacionarme. Y desde ese trabajo para adelante, por ejemplo, en todos nuestros proyectos siempre vamos a incluir a un grupo de adolescentes. Tienen que estar presentes, ya no puedo trabajar sin ese grupo. Necesito esa interpelación de las nuevas visiones. No podemos seguir teniendo la misma visión.
So yes, it changes the way we do theater. It closes a chapter, but actually for me that happened already before with Paisajes para no colorear, because from there on I know I will be working differently, and I knew it also when we premiered that because it called into question the practices of aesthetic and theater creation, and it changed and transformed also myself. This work with over 150 teenagers. It opened up the way I was thinking about theater, and also the forms of relating and with each other, the relationships we create with each other while doing art. And in all the future works, there will be teenagers as part of the process, because they call us into question, they bring in new questions, things we have not been thinking about before. So they will always be in the future part of the process.
Y en términos formales, creo que tenemos que repensar lo que estamos haciendo. Por eso creo también que hay una especie de un exceso de discursividad verbalizada, en donde creo que las miradas hoy en día tienen que ir al centro del cuerpo, y creo que hay que dar un paso, como compañía, un paso hacia lo desconocido, hacia lo no seguro. Yo creo que nuestro próximo proyecto, que se llama Oasis de la Impunidad, tiene que ser un caminar por un terreno no seguro teatralmente. Creo que tiene que ser un momento de experimentar, de darnos el espacio de hacer un verdadero laboratorio, no irse a lo seguro, a lo probado. Creo que los tiempos de hoy necesitan que nosotros también nos replanteemos también nuestras prácticas y nuestros formatos.
So speaking more on a formal level, aesthetic formal level, we also have to rethink what we do. I feel that there's an excess of a discourse in the sense of expressing verbally discursive positions, and that we have to look more into the glances that really cross and cut through our bodies. We have to think about that has not been thought of yet. And that's actually something we are planning to do with our next project, which is Oasis de la Impunidad, so Oasis of Impunity, which is walking on a territory which is not secure, to experiment, to really do a a theatrical laboratory to do that has not been established yet, and to rethink what has been done so far.
Tell us more about that project, the new project.
Bueno, ese proyecto nace de preguntas que tenemos de cómo, y que tiene su base un poco en el estallido social, en esa erupción que pasó, en esos cuerpos que estaban en las calles expuestos a la violencia y ejerciendo violencia también. Y nos viene ahí la pregunta de cómo habita esa violencia en el cuerpo, cuando el cuerpo se desborda de indignación. ¿Cómo habita la indignación en el cuerpo? Creo que son preguntas muy interesantes y también darnos cuenta de cuando la violencia es el único camino posible de expresión, porque también es la única forma de oponerse a mandatos incluso que son inmorales. Eso me parece una buena cuestionarse eso.
So this project starts with questions that are very much linked to the social outburst, this eruption. Sometimes it's also said in Spanish, because it's all about the bodies on the streets. That are violent, but they also are being violated. And how violence is living in the bodies, which bursts out as part of this indignation. And also in a question on how this violence is the only way possible to express a form of resistance against what has already been inflicted on the bodies.
Y desde ahí hay muchas preguntas, porque si bien todo el ejercicio de violencia, que algunos podemos decir legítimo, ¿no? Porque también está el supuestamente llamado orden público, que parece ser el principio que rige. Entonces hay muchas preguntas. ¿Cómo queremos que haya paz en un país si no hay justicia? ¿Y desde qué perspectiva podemos también legitimar la resistencia que lleva consigo mismo el ejercicio de violencia? Pero siempre ha sido una violencia, y eso hay que ser muy claro, contra bienes materiales. Eso me parece muy interesante, porque pareciera que en este país también se cuida más un bien material que la vida humana. Un bien material se ha elevado jerárquicamente como un bien superior. Y eso creo que es digno de cómo la democracia no se ha hecho cargo de eso.
So there are many questions about that there's violence that is being used, which is legitimate, that presumably serves the public order. But the question is, how can there be peace in a country without justice? And is there not a legitimate form of resistance which uses and mobilizes violence as well? And it's important to note that the protesters, when they used violence, it was against material goods in public space. And that somehow in Chile, these objects, these material objects, are being more protected than the lives and bodies of humans. And that tells a lot about how so far the state and the government have dealt with different forms of violence. On the one side, the one about violence against bodies, which is not being persecuted, and on the other side, the violence against objects in public space.
Y en ese sentido volvemos a una pregunta fundamental, es que ¿de qué forma transformamos las cosas si no es a través de la violencia? Y algo muy paradigmático, porque lo que está en el proceso que está viviendo nuestro país, un proceso hacia una nueva constitución de refundación, se logró gracias al ejercicio de violencia en las calles, a través del cual la clase política se vio amenazada y tuvo que ceder. Entonces esas son las preguntas. ¿Existe otra forma aparte de esa? Ejemplificando con Chile, que fue esa la forma.
So it really goes to a fundamental question. Is change possible without violence? In the sense of the situation in Chile being paradigmatic. There is a new constitution now, and this is due to the violence that has occurred on the streets, because that really made the political class to be afraid, and they had to react. And then so that poses the question, is transformation possible? What are the means for transformation beyond violence?
Yeah, this is incredible questions, age-old questions on, you know, what is real, what is the utopia, the representation of bodies on the stage, from bodies on streets, how theater deals with that. And I hope we will be able to see that work that's coming out also in form of this incredible moment, I think also in the history of mankind. I mean, you almost think about Haiti, about, you know, the uprisings and the early successful ones, and French revolutions. We actually celebrating 150 years, if I'm right, of the experiments of the Paris Commune. So it will be interesting to see how will these delegates work together, who come from all forms of lives, something that came out of a resistance on the street, and how will they react to that? Always these are bodies. Racine, Rosia said that these are people bring their bodies on the streets. These are people who are dreaming. They are imagining a different future, and they bring their life, their bodies in, and try to actively be part of a change. And in this moment, it seemed to be successful. It seems to be that change has happened and will happen. It is incredible. Coming closer to the end, but Marco, in theater, what are your references? How are you influenced? You know, I know Latin America is such a strong country with such a great tradition. Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Venezuela, and so many other countries. But there's European theater, there's North American, Canadian, Indian, Chinese. So how are you, in your escuelas you made, where do you sit? Who are your heroes? What has influenced you in your work to say, I want to bridge my aesthetic work with social movement? What was important to you?
Bueno, tengo un marco de referencias, un abanico muy grande. Son muchos los artistas que uno admira, que admira ciertas cosas. Bueno, acá en Chile, bueno, está, podríamos decir, Andrés Pérez, y muchos más. Me demoraría mucho en nombrar, porque yo creo que de cada artista algo me hace sentido. Entonces, de cada trabajo algo me queda a mí, y en ese sentido el marco referencial serían todo el arte que yo veo, porque de algo saco una lección.
So I have many references. It would be like a huge variety. And there are many artists of whom I admire many things. I mean, if you talk about Chile, Andrés Pérez would be an example, but actually of every artist I know or see something, I admire something. Of every work I see, I admire something. So actually I have to say that everything that I see is part of my world of references.
Ahora, si tuviera que nombrar a una que tuve el placer de conocer y de ver su trabajo, y que todavía, y que lo que hace en escena es algo sublime y bello, que no lo he podido vivir nunca antes, es Pina Bausch. Creo que me cambió también verla a ella, ha sido una de las cosas más bellas que me ha pasado, teatralmente hablando.
So if I have to mention but one, it would be someone who I actually met and I could see, and it was sublime, and one of the most beautiful thing I ever saw was Pina Bausch, and that experience really changed my perspective.
Pero como así también hay otros colectivos que a lo mejor artísticamente uno no le hace sentido, pero sí a lo mejor tienen un trabajo social impresionante y que también es inspirador.
So it could also be collectives, which not necessarily in an artistic way, but also in a social way, impacted and inspiring.
Yo soy un gran ladrón, observo mucho, saco lo mejor de lo que puedo de los artistas que puedo ver.
I'm a big thief. I observe a lot, and I reuse what I find.
Fantastic. I really, would like to thank both of you too for taking the time, especially also Marco. Also, we were lucky, Martin, when we talked together to create this talk. The election happened now, and it also had this incredible outcome nobody really foresaw. So this is really a moment. We are as close as you can get, and I'm stunned that this is not more represented, I think, in our papers, in our news, in the international news. It is something sensational and so full of hope. And the fact that theater and artists have been part of that revolution, as we can say it, and something is churning, is revolving. And often, it takes 50, 100 years for things to really change. But this is a turning point, and art has supported it. Art has been on the side of social justice, of democracy, and the fight for freedom. And Marco's work is representing for that. And also, as Guillermo and others reminded us, it was dangerous. It was not just something you wouldn't find work. You had now you also couldn't go out, of course, but it was never an easy business to create and produce a meaningful theater in Chile. And we have our highest respect, and we really hope that we will be able to see your work and to come back, maybe as a closing statement for both of you, and whether it came to music or novels or films or whatever, in that time of Corona, what inspired you? What gave you something to think about? And you felt this became more important to me in the time you live. Marco, maybe you start.
Sí, eso no lo entendí al final. Martín.
¿Qué música o literatura o qué te influyó en estos meses de pandemia o cambió tu perspectiva? ¿Qué hayas descubierto ahora?
Sí. A ver, voy a ser muy sincero. Me imagino que todo artista debería decir que fue un periodo de mucha lectura, de mucha inspiración. Debo decir que la cuarentena debe ser el momento en que menos he podido leer en mi vida. Porque al tener hijos terminaba a las 9 de la noche muy cansado, queriendo dormir. Lo que sí estoy viendo o me interesa más que literatura, sigo las redes sociales durante mucho tiempo. Yo no tengo redes sociales, pero me interesó durante mucho tiempo, los primeros 6 meses, seguir las redes sociales de la gente de ultraderecha de Chile. Hice un trabajo en relación a eso, de leerla y anotar sus comentarios. Ese fue mi trabajo, leer los discursos de la ultraderecha de Chile todos los días durante 5 meses.
So I will be very honest. Many artists will probably say that they had a lot of time for reading and inspiration during the quarantine, like the lockdown. But for me, it was the time I read the least in my life, because when you have children, you're at home, then you only could read at night, and then you're super exhausted from all the work at home. And so something else I did, and this is perhaps interesting, is especially at the beginning of the pandemic to read in the social media, but to read within the networks of the ultra right, like extreme right, conservative milieus of Chile in the social media, and to see what these people were writing. It is something I did a work on, and I was researching that for 5 months.
Incredible, yeah. So to look at it, and what the other.
Era masoquismo. Soy masoquista.
Yeah, it was. I think that translates.
Yeah, a good thing to open up and see what does the other side think, and we can only hope everybody did that. So this is something that makes us different, I think, from others at our field, but also our side in that way is open and is thinking and looks at other things. But Martin, for you, how was it for you?
Yeah, I actually wanted to take the opportunity to, from my perspective, to add 3 things to what we have been discussing throughout this hour now, which is to stress again, because I was in Chile between before the pandemic, 2020 to 2021 over Christmas in January. So I saw the streets. It was really impressing how everything had transformed and how monuments were like redefined. And so really to understand the artistic imprint of these demonstrations and what happened and the shows and how this idea of staging and redesigning the cityscape and appropriating urban space is really something that has to be stressed a lot. The second thing we all have to learn, and I was quite visible for me when I was there, is that thinking in an intersectional way to think of feminism, ecological questions of indigenous people, all these things, they are so intertwined and connected. They can only be thought together, which is something we intellectually always claim. But if I look into the German discourses, every debate is singled out. You talk about ecology, you talk about feminism, but you don't connect these post-colonial questions. And in Chile, these things are tied together. And this is really, I think, the seed for the success we're seeing now. It's food for thought of how we are doing our intellectual work in the US, but also here in Europe. And the third thing I wanted to stress is that this project Marco was telling about, Oasis de la Impunidad, Oasis of Impunity, is thought as a model project of how international collaborations should be in the future. Because the model we have been collaborating and co-producing and showing things at festivals before the pandemic.
It sounds like we lost him for a moment. Martin, if you can hear us, we lost him. So he did say, you know, that the stunning developments in this uprising when people were on the street redecorating the street furniture, the public furnitures, as we say, taking public space back, how significant that was. And I think also what Martin said is of real significance, that first of all, it is successful, something happened. And the significance is that what he now pointed out, and this is something very important, I think, to ponder, think about, is that he said the issues were seen as connected and not as separate, something very different from a German discourse, or perhaps although from the US. Martin, go back to your third point.
The third point is about international collaboration, because before, you know, a lot of, I mean, I don't have to talk about ecological footprint, but also how do we finance projects elsewhere, which we then later invite to feed our debates, our discourses, you know, especially those that are privileged, like I would say the US, the European countries. We have our perspective on the rest of the world. We invite works of art, but we're not contributing to them being produced in the first place. So we only are interested in our own narrow discourses in our well-off local. And we have to rethink how we work together, how we co-produce, how we also redefine time for creation. So far, we have only paid for showing things, but not for debates in between, for the interstitial work, for the creation. And so we are at a moment where we have to rethink international collaboration. And this project, Oasis de la Impunidad, is like an attempt to do so, connecting theaters, festivals across Europe and the Americas to really take ownership and responsibility for artists.
Amazing. It sounds important, something we should research, and we need new forms, we need new ways. We have to radically rethink. Kirill Serebrennikov, who was here, said nothing worked. We know that. We have to start now from zero again. We have to reinvent things. We have to question everything, as Milo Rau says. And I think the work of both of you, this, if I may say, M&M, Martin and Marco, the M&M work, you know, is also is part of it. Thank you so much, Martin, for translating. I know it's so complicated, and to do that and on a live situation here. And so it took us a little bit more time than the normal hour because we had to translate. But Marcus, thank you for sharing, for being here with us. And we can see, also feel you are still under the impression of what happened. It's still, you're still processing it, and it was a great privilege for us to be part of it. And to all our listeners, I really would like to point out, you know, to really follow that, see what will happen. It is something of real interest. And also, what does it mean for theater and the arts really? In 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we'll say, what changed, what came out of it? And often these periods of change also produce great art, the uncertainty. And yes, the questions of, you know, when is violence legitimate, when not, when it's wrong, like in the January 6th in the US, when is it right? So very big questions, and everybody is wrestling with it. But as Martin pointed out, something worked in Chile. Something
and we are,
changed. We need to find out why,
and it goes with,
yeah.
Yeah, and it goes without saying that we are representing all the company, all the team of Re-sentida. It's two of us, but the team is much bigger. And I also wanted to stress that it's very nice that we actually were speaking Spanish, because it's a reality of the cities we live in, that they are multilingual, and I don't have to tell that to you in a place like New York. But it's good that we also, in these forms of artistic exchange, we really just have a natural relation to speaking in different languages.
So thank you. It was a great contribution towards our global series, and this is what makes us also different. What we are interested in, really interested. It was fantastic to hear from you, Marco. Great work. Work with 150 young female teenagers, and to really listen to them. But to really listen and do something with it. And to also then in the big picture see what happens when young voices, the kids who said, we're not going to pay the subway ticket that's higher, So it was the last thing that, what came out of that, and it was started by young people. And so, and Martin, thank you, your great work also with Milo Rau, which we follow. So, and at the Münchner Kammerspiele, and about the public space of the city, the project you guys have, we are all really interested about that, because in New York, we have questions. What will happen? What should happen? So it's great to hear from you. So thank you for HowlRound again, for hosting us, Vijay, Thea, Andy, for making it possible, the listeners for sticking with us. I know it takes a bit more time for the translations, but this is a reality of the world, and we should be much more used to that. It should be actually normal, and as someone said, like the great Gorky Theater in Berlin, when they translated every play in German with subtitles. All New York theaters should have subtitles in Spanish, or part of it could be done in Spanish and in English. Why not? Actors are out there who can do it in many places. So we need to also realize what we actually advocate for on our own stage. It was a great contribution. Next week we'll have Carol Martin back about the theater of the real, and voices from New York and from around the world. So thank you all. And again, Marco and Martin, thank you. And to our listeners, I hope you will stick with us and listen to us. So much is out there, but we feel the global discourse which we have here is important, and also good for Marco to know. And Martin, people are listening, people are interested, and we really are. So bye-bye, and I hope to see you all in person. Bye-bye, and thanks.
Bye, thank you.
For the invitation. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time. Bye-bye.